Nutrient-dense whole food.
Things that have all those vitamins and nutrients and fiber in and of themselves.
It's a core distinction between multi-ingredients, highly processed foods. Whole food would generally be a single ingredient, minimally processed, if any processing.
I feel like there's more nuance to that. You're putting on weight, but somehow you don't feel like you ate that much.
Are all calories equal? This is the part where they stop becoming equal.
Welcome to the Lucid Fitness Podcast. I'm Erik and this is Sarah, and we started Lucid Fitness to help beginners find actionable guidance in a sea of fitness and nutrition information.
Welcome back to the Lucid Fitness Podcast. Last week we talked about calories in, calories out as the fourth principle in our Lucid principles. This week we're talking about our fifth principle, focusing on nutrient-dense whole foods.
So calories in versus calories out is basically our foundation of this nutritional section. But what you fill those calories with is just as important, right? So what exactly is, when we say a whole food, a nutritionally dense food, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, a whole food would generally be a single ingredient food and a food that is generally minimally processed, if any processing. Think apple, think beef, think grains, simple grains, things like that.
Okay.
Like things that only have single ingredients, and the processing, if any, because like most beef is processed to some extent, processing being they're cutting it in a certain way. Most grains are minimally processed to make them actually edible. And so it's a core distinction between multi-ingredients, highly processed foods, like on an extreme example, like a Twinkie. There's, a dozen ingredients, none of which you really understand. The food itself is much more processed in that it's combined in a way to be hyper-palatable, which we talked about last week. It's combined in a way to remove most of the nutrition so that it can be hyper-palatable. Because by removing a lot of the things that come in whole foods, like all those nutrients and all the extra stuff and all the fiber, it makes these hyper-palatable non-whole foods, makes them much easier to eat. And in a sense, it makes them more money because you eat more of it, right? And so whole foods in general, to get back to the point, is a food that is intact in its natural form usually. Mm-hmm. And if it's not, it's only minimally processed to make it edible, essentially. Like, I can't give you a whole cow and expect you to eat it. You need a certain level of processing in order to eat the meat. But at a core, it's still a single ingredient beef. Mm-hmm. And all of the nutrition's intact in most cases, obviously. Like, for the most part, single ingredient foods are almost always minimally processed, just by nature.
And so basically being like fruits, vegetables, lean meats, fish, eggs, whole grains, those sort of things, the things that have all those vitamins and nutrients and fiber in and of themselves. I think that feels pretty simple, but I feel like there's more nuance to that.
Well, there's nuance to it because for the most part, the things that we see in the grocery store are processed and are a combination of ingredients. And the combination itself isn't always a bad thing, right? Like if you took a bunch of slices of apples and put it with a bunch of slices of pork, you've got yourself a nice recipe made out of two whole foods, right? It's good for you, it's nutritious. But a lot of the times these packaged foods, they come in a way that's not just the combination of ingredients, but they're also processed to remove nutrition through the processing process. For example, like a highly processed form of an apple would be apple sauce or apple juice of increasing processing. So an apple would be a whole food. Then you got apple sauce, which is kind of whole food, but it's processed for sure. Some of the nutrition is lost. And then you have apple juice, which is functionally just sugar water. So that's kind of the scale of processing. And so the more processing usually, the less nutrition in the food. And the more ingredients usually, what we see in these packaged foods is the ingredients, they start getting like anti-caking agents, and they start getting,
preservatives and all
and
those
foods
things,
and or natural flavors and all of these extra ingredients that are of questionable value to your body when you consume them.
Yeah. And then there's the element of once you start dinking around with stuff and you're adding sugar and you're adding fats so that it, has a better mouthfeel or that it tastes better, and then you're adding more sodium to make the fats taste better, you're basically stacking calories on top of calories on top of calories for not a lot of bites that you're eating. It's a massive amount of calories, which, like we talked about in the other podcast, which if you haven't seen that one, be sure and follow the link in the description so you can catch up with us. Calories in versus calories out. Well, if you're eating this much food, but it's 600 calories, there's no way you're full.
Right.
So of course you're going to eat more and still never feel full. And then you get to a point where you've eaten more calories than your body needs. You're putting on weight, but somehow you don't feel like you ate that much.
There's a reason that these two principles are so close to each other as the fourth and fifth and the first two in the nutrition section of the principles is because they go hand in hand, really. By eating whole foods, they're usually more satiating. They're more nutritious. They make you feel more full. And all of these elements, they contribute to how many calories you're eating in a day. And by correlation of what I just said, the more whole foods you eat, the less calories you're going to eat in a day. Just that's how it works. Your body, 300 calories of chicken, broccoli, and brown rice looks a lot more and feels a lot more filling than 300 calories of zebra cakes, right? You're not even going to register the zebra cakes as something that is satiating because again, it's hyper-palatable. It's designed to be eaten in mass, and it's bad for you because not only are you not getting nutrition from those calories, you're getting the calories. And like we talked about last week, from an energy perspective, it's still a calorie that you're consuming, but you're missing out on all of the nutritional value that comes with those calories. And those are important things when it comes to regulating your hunger, regulating your insulin, regulating all of these body mechanics that keep you healthy, right? And so when you look at a meal, it should functionally be 80% whole foods and then 20% extra stuff. For example, I love hummus. It's technically a processed food. There's several different ingredients in it. I try to choose the ones that have the ingredients I recognize, but oftentimes it's just, I'm eating hummus. But when the food you're eating as a whole is primarily whole foods, there's a lot more nutrition that goes into it. Not to mention, hummus generally is made out of things that are nutritious. So it's kind of a game of choosing the ingredients that you do really enjoy to kind of give yourself an allowance of foods that aren't specifically, the best for you. And that's why we talked about it in the previous video, the 80-20 rule is trying to make your whole diet 80% nutritious whole foods, and then have the 20% to be more of a flex and allow you to live life and enjoy food, right? Because one of the disadvantages of whole foods is while you can prepare them in ways that are delicious, and I recommend that everybody learns how to prepare whole foods in a delicious way, there's certain things that if you're planning to eat normally like a normal person, you're going to have some processed foods, right? A lot of sauces and a lot of think sour cream, things like this that they're not really bad for you, but they are processed non-whole foods. And so by applying the 80-20, it's more realistic of an expectation of yourself than trying to make your entire diet single ingredient foods combined into a palatable meal.
I think that flows right into where, yes, eating whole foods can feel sometimes even overwhelming, right? Because you feel like you have to get all these things and then you have to prepare them and put them together. And and it's not as easy as just, pull it out the freezer and put it in the microwave, right? But there are some massive benefits, not even just beyond the calories and how full you feel and how those vitamins are good for your body, but there are some other benefits, such as how eating more whole foods truly does change your palate. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, you'll notice it in sugary foods and in general with sweet foods a lot. When your palate is accustomed to hyper-palatable, very sweet foods, think most junk food, even people who eat junk food understand what junk food is. Like when you eat candy and you're drinking soda and you're eating pizza all the time, like these foods are delicious because they're designed to be that way, right? And what it does is it does change your palate to the point where it's a lot more difficult to enjoy whole foods because they don't taste as good. That's just the reality of it. Most of us aren't professional chefs, and when you're comparing a chicken breast to like a really well-made burger, of course the burger's going to taste better. No, like we're not trying to lie about that, but a lot of it has to do with your palate, like shifting in the favor of the hyper-palatable foods. And it's a massive change when you do start moving towards whole foods. Like you start to experience flavors that you weren't really experiencing before. I'm not a huge fan of the way most vegetables taste. But now that I've adjusted my palate more towards whole foods, I can start to really taste the nuance in these vegetables that otherwise it's just something you ate for health reasons. Like you can actually taste the flavor. And I saw it the most for me when I shifted to eating. I've never been a big sweets guy, but when I stopped like drinking soda and eating candy on the occasion, and I really started noticing how fruits taste. And now certain fruits to me are overwhelmingly sweet, even like a frozen strawberry or a frozen like peach. Those flavors become much more vibrant when you're not honestly addicted to sugar, because you're not addicted to these foods that are very, very flavorful. And it's all relative, right? Most people understand how these hyper-palatable foods taste. But there's an effect that happens when you start eating more whole foods is they stop tasting as good as they once did. And you start really, I know you and I are both at the same level, like whole foods start tasting better.
Yeah.
Right? Because not only do you get accustomed to this new adjusted, more accurate palate, so to speak, but you also you start to feel better when you eat these foods. And so there's a connection that happens in your brain where it's like, I eat these foods because it makes me not just taste good, but it makes me feel better. And when I go and I eat that burger and French fries from, the local fast food place, I don't feel that way. It may taste good, but it doesn't taste good for you in the sense that it doesn't sit well. It doesn't feel as good to consume. And it doesn't, again, like we were talking about, it doesn't feel as satiating. And it's a lot, you can very easily go to any fast food and eat through 1,500 calories without batting an eye. Most people can do it. It's designed to be that way. But if you go and you make a nutritious meal made out of whole foods, you're not going to eat 1,500 calories. You're going to get full a lot quicker than that.
Because you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah, because these foods they're whole, they're complete, they're how we're supposed to be eating. And so it's designed in a way that your body processes it accurately. It tells your body, okay, I'm full, I've eaten enough. And just by the nature of eating whole food, like for example, if calories in, calories out weren't a core principle, we could technically have just this one as a rule. Because what would happen is if you're eating 80% whole foods, you're much, much less likely to overconsume foods.
Right.
And just by the nature of eating whole foods, your calories would be much more in check. We combine the two for more of a extensive exposure to the nutritional side of things, but they work hand in hand. Whole foods control your calories, right? And when you're controlling your calories, if you want to feel full, you generally lean towards whole foods.
Right. It's a reset. Like you were talking about, like you're always going to have a dopamine response to sugar, to glucose. That's just how human beings are made. That's how we've survived for tens of thousands of years. But when you begin to reset your dopamine response, you will get the same dopamine response from a bowl of frozen blueberries that you would to a bag of Sour Patch Kids,
Sure.
right? And just in the same way, that kind of 10, 15 to 21 days that it takes for your taste buds to transition over to, oh, this tastes right, it will do the same thing in the reverse, where those kind of chemically flavors, I kind of put it in the way of like, you know how some people can taste aspartame or cilantro tastes like soap. Once you've reset to these whole foods and you go back and you eat these things, you start to really notice how plasticky and chemically and like just enough wrong that you're kind of like, oh, I don't actually really want to eat that because that tastes weird. And it's amazing. It's almost like that smell, like when you can't smell your own house, how quickly your brain will cover that up because the dopamine response of sugar.
Right.
And that how it's really so short. It's like 2 weeks amount of time to transition to this other side. And that can be a powerful thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is powerful. And it's part of the process too, right? Because to make it anywhere with fitness and nutrition, you have to think about what you're putting in your body. That's an important part of the journey, is learning what foods should you be putting in your body. A lot of people, they don't really know any better because they've, either grew up with certain types of foods, or they've just, this is how I've done it since my 20s kind of thing. And so, but sooner or later, those hyper-palatable, hyper-processed foods catch up to you. And that's where you start to feel like junk day in and day out because you're consuming junk. And, I've never been a huge fan of the "you are what you eat" phrase, but I think there's a lot of truth to it, that the longer you go eating nutritious whole foods, the better you're going to feel on average, obviously. Like somebody who, you're still going to have days where you don't feel good, like you don't become superhuman, but it definitely puts your average much, much higher over time because you're fueling your body. You're giving your body what it needs instead of just giving it the calories it needs to survive. There's a big difference, right? And going back to one of the questions you asked in the previous one is like, are all calories equal? This is the part where they stop becoming equal. Is like when we start looking at things from outside of the energy perspective.
Outside of the macro, and we move to the micro. We move to those like, what is nutrition?
Yeah.
What exactly are vitamins? What are they doing for your body? What are those minerals doing to optimize your brain function, optimize your muscle function, optimize how well your bones are regrowing as you're causing damage to them, which causes them to grow back like better and stronger. But you have to give them the building blocks to do this.
That's exactly it. Giving your body the fuel it needs, it's important for everyone. But if you want to build a better body, build a better life, build a better health, it becomes critically important because most, especially with people who go to the gym, they slowly and gradually will realize the importance of nutrition because it's kind of a trial and error. It's like every time I eat a pizza on Friday, my gym on Saturday doesn't feel as good as when I eat this, whole food meal. And so while you don't have to make it an extreme thing, you will learn the value of it if you actually give it a chance. And then I think that it's one of the harder things to do because people who have been eating these hyper-palatable, hyper-processed foods for so long, they lose track of what it feels like to feel normal because they've been like in this sloggy eating garbage food for so long. It's become their norm to feel bad almost. And so to them, it's like, oh, I always feel like this, but they could feel better by eating a more nutritious diet. And everyone feels better eating more nutrition, more nutritious foods. It's just the way the body works, right? It likes to have those micronutrients. It likes to have all of those other nutrients in the whole foods that you some processed food, they try to emulate it. You see it with some hyper processed foods. They start to add ingredients back because they're like, oh man, like we stripped everything of this. We got to at least you see it in like fortified cereals. There's, more, they literally process the foods to the point where there's no longer nutrition, and then they try to add it back so they can say it's a nutritionally balanced food. Yeah. And technically it's better than not having that stuff
but still
put back in, but it's still not a whole food, and if we could somehow find a way to make a cereal that is a whole food, it'd probably be a valuable thing. But the idea is like we need to find a balance where most of the foods we're eating are nutritionally valuable to our body, but still having that 20% that allows us to continue to contribute and be involved in our culture. Because one of the big things about food is it is very ingrained in almost every culture. Every culture in the world is ingrained. Like there's food, right? And so you can't live life in a way that's so rigid. You can't enjoy a meal with your family because you're on such a strict diet. And so here at Lucid Fitness, we're trying to find that balance where it's like, okay, if you're eating 80% of your meals are pretty dang good, those few little ones, they start to become less your identity and less how you're feeling and more of like a nice special treat, right?
Absolutely.
Obviously, you don't want to go off the deep end and every Sunday you eat, 4,500 calories of ice cream before you go to bed. But, there is a certain element of allowing yourself the flexibility to eat real, like fun foods, and enjoy foods with people.
Yeah, we talked about that in one of the previous podcasts when we were talking about balance and how if you don't implement balance with purpose, that's when the binging and purging starts. That's when the cravings become out of control, and then you do fall off the deep end because you've not planned for balance.
Right.
And then I think this also kind of we're touching into, so I feel like we might as well just step all the way into the puddle that is, like we're saying, not all processed foods are things that you shouldn't eat. We're not saying eliminate all processed foods, because that also plays into where we are in the fitness realm. Like I still drink protein drinks. Like a whey protein drink is a massively processed food, but I use it to maintain and make sure that I'm reaching my protein goals every day. Where are some of those processed foods that are, I don't want to say not as bad, but are useful to us, especially when we're at a place where maybe you're trying to put on more weight or you're trying to lose weight, and where can we kind of implement some of those?
Yeah, I mean, protein powder is a strong example. One of the things about protein powder and protein in general is it's difficult to make hyper-palatable protein foods because protein by nature fills us up more. And so I used to use protein as a means of controlling hunger because I found whenever I don't snack anymore, but I found before when I started craving things, I'd drink a chocolate protein shake and those cravings would go away. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of people, and this is kind of a theory of mine, for a lot of people, I feel like they've lost track of the signaling from the appropriate amount of protein. And let me expand on that. So I think that for many, many people, when you're eating a very high carbohydrate diet, your body is kind of looking for the protein in those carbs to get the protein that they need for muscular repair or body repair or whatever it may be. And so in your brain, it kind of hardwires the idea of getting enough protein to consuming carbohydrates. And so that's why it kind of compounds with these carbohydrates where you're eating more and more carbs because your body's looking for proteins. And it's such a trace level that you're over consuming these carbohydrates because you never hit your protein.
6 of them, you have to, then you get a little bit. So your body's like trying to 6, 12, 18, 24 just to get to the, the number that it needs.
Right. And so by short-circuiting it and giving yourself a massive influx of protein from the get-go, a lot of the times your cravings Turns out it was just your body wanted some protein, but your body's looking for protein in the wrong place. And to get back to your question about what processed foods are actually valuable, that's a perfect example. And there's other processed foods that can also be healthy for you. It depends on the ingredients. It depends on the mechanism of processing. And for the most part, that's not very clear. And so that's where whole foods are important, is because it's very clear, like, this is an apple. It may have like a wax on it to make it live forever, or it may be genetically modified to taste better, but it's an apple, right? And so when you're eating these hyper-processed foods, it's not as clear. And so you do have to learn, like, to look at the nutritional labels so that you can recognize, like, are these ingredients in here? Can I even pronounce them? And most of the time, like, even look at protein bars. Generally in the fitness world, protein bars are, looked at in a positive light, but look at the ingredients. You have all of these things in there that is like, what even are these?
Well, it's the same amount of calories, and it's practically the same amount of carbs and sugars and fats as a Snickers bar or a Three Musketeer bar. And they're advertising that it has, 12 grams of protein. Okay, but a Snickers bar has 12 grams of protein. So you get to a point where you start to realize where things can be useful, and then where the things are that kind of are a gimmick, right? I think that when I always pass in the grocery store, when you're in the produce, you pass all those juices, and people are like, oh, it's green. It's a green juice. It has to be healthy, right? But like we talked about before, it's mostly apple juice, which is just sugar water for the most part.
Yeah, and it's crazy if you actually like look into what's happening with those. They're processing all of the nutrition out of an apple. And then for the ones think like naked drinks, they're very thick. They feel like they have nutrition in it. So they're making this apple juice, and then they're just adding things back in order to make what feels like a more nutritious, and it is more nutritious, right? It has added micronutrients and like all of these things that make it seem like, oh, this is a nutritionally sound food for consumption. But what's happening is, like, oftentimes those things, another thing they're adding is sugar, right? They're adding the extra sugar. And so a lot of the times the micronutrients not making up for the 46 grams of sugar in your naked drink, right? Like without going into too much detail about sugar and its toxicity to our body, but most people understand that sugar is generally not good for you. And so the benefits of adding these post-processing nutrients into these drinks is usually overshadowed dramatically by the amount of sugar that they add into it. Granted, you could make a very nutritious smoothie. Right?
Yeah, like that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, whoa, you go get a juice, but that 16 to 24 ounces, you're still going to be hungry. You basically consumed the same amount of sugar as if you had just drinking a soda anyway, when you could have gone home and you could have made a smoothie that had a whole cucumber in it, a whole apple in it, 2 sticks of celery and a carrot. Right. And you still have all of the fiber. You still have all of the micronutrients. Yes, you've broken it down. You've processed it, but you did it. You processed it. Right. You know exactly what went inside that you're consuming, and you're going to feel a lot fuller because that is all going to be like a liter worth of smoothie.
Yeah. And it's the same thing about the spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. You got the whole apple. You got the apple that you've turned into a smoothie. Mm-hmm. You've got naked drinks, which is an apple stripped to apple juice and then nutrition back in. And then you have the apple juice itself, and you could probably squeeze, the apple sauce a little bit above the juice. And so it's all this spectrum, and it's important that you frame your perspective of foods through the scale of how close to a whole food is this. Right. And going back to my example of hummus, it's like if you look at the ingredients of a high quality hummus, it's usually like chickpeas as the main ingredient. And then, maybe 3 or 4 other ingredients that go into making hummus, olive oil, things like that. And you start looking at it, it's like, yeah, this is a processed food, but is this like me eating a Snickers bar with, a bunch of these like I always think like when it's like zinc something or another, there's always like this metallic type sounding thing in it. Like if you are looking at an ingredient thing and there's like what looks to be some sort of like science project ingredients in there, like for lack of better terms, like mercury something, then it's probably like you shouldn't be eating it, like, because that's not a natural thing, right?
Right.
And so the idea is to frame your entire perspective through the lens of like, okay, this isn't a whole food, but if it has 4 ingredients that are just mashed together to make hummus, then, you know, it's pretty close to a whole food. It probably has some nutrition, and you'll see that reflected on your nutritional label. These processed foods will have natural ingredients, natural whole food ingredients, and usually some micronutrients in it.
And, you know, I always think of, I don't know where I had heard it. I heard it so long ago. I want to say it was like early teens. And I heard it in a documentary that was basically talking about reading the nutritional label, and more than reading the nutritional label where it lays out the macros, where it has all the ingredients. If you went to your kitchen and decided, I'm going to make a Snickers bar, guarantee you 25 of those 30 ingredients you would not need to make a Snickers bar at home. You absolutely wouldn't. And that's something you should be conscious of when you're consuming packaged foods. There's a lot of things in there that are in there for reasons like shelf stability, like palatability, like adding back nutrients that, why did we take them out in the first place? And a lot of things that you shouldn't be putting in your body that we don't fully understand the repercussions of yet.
I think we're starting to see.
Yeah.
We're starting to see it pretty significantly. People who, despite their best efforts, can't lose weight. People who, you know, have, you know, crippling health issues from the age 30 onward. These are all symptoms of a poor food system. You know, the system designed with only hedonistic flavors in mind, and that in general, like you were saying, like consuming these things aren't tested. You know, these foods are FDA approved, but they're not testing the long-term effect of every single, you know, anti-caking agent or, you know, whatever chemicals they're putting in these foods. They're not testing these things. Like, we're the test. And for the most part, we're seeing the consequences of that, because we'd be a much healthier population as a whole if we primarily focus on whole foods. And so we kind of have to shift it is an effortful thing to have to do, is shifting away from these hyper-palatable, hyper-processed foods. And
because arguably it's been purposefully made to be easier.
Right. And the argument's always been like, oh, eating health foods is healthier. I understand that, but it's way, way more expensive.
Yeah.
And, you know, to some extent, yeah, probably. But also think about how the system's designed. Imagine if the system had been designed where whole foods were the priority and your health was the priority to these companies. The impact of that alone would make the scale of whole foods a lot cheaper in general. But the fact of the matter is they're choosing the cheapest option because we continue to consume the cheapest option. Think like high fructose corn syrup, highly processed corn that everybody consumes because so many people drink soda, right? They're going to just keep making it because it's cheap. Whereas if we had gone back to a more natural state of sweetener, you know, maybe these foods wouldn't have become so overwhelmingly addicting in the first place. And what I'm getting at is the reason things are so expensive is because we continue to consume the things that are hyper-palatable and very, very flavorful instead of choosing the other route. And what happens if enough people start signaling this other way, then these companies go and it's like, well, people want whole foods. Let's scale up whole food production. And magically whole foods start getting cheaper. That's just how it's, you know, we do have as a whole control over where these companies are going, right? They're not going to continue to make Snickers bars if everyone stops eating Snickers bars. But We do. We eat Snicker bars. And so they're like, heck yeah, let's keep making Snicker bars more and more consumable, right? And so not to put all of the blame on us, but we do have to take some responsibility of what we're putting in our mouths and understand the implications of scaling that across hundreds of millions of people. And these companies, they're always going to gravitate towards what's most profitable. And so if we want them to choose the healthier options as what's profitable, then we need to start buying those healthy options. And all of that starts at an independent effort, choosing what you put into your mouth.
Like we talked about with working out, no matter what, you are responsible for getting yourself to the gym and lifting the heavy weight. It's the same thing here. You are responsible for the things that you're putting in your mouth, and you're responsible for the things you're putting in your children's mouth. And of course, like at the age we all were there for the boom of organic, right? So people decided, I want something that says organic on it. What did everybody do? So we know that this works. Now, of course, obviously there's manipulation of that, but for the most part, we know that this could be the case if more people chose to be conscious of it.
Right. And the things about Whole Foods is like, there's no way to lie, right? Like you can't, I guess I shouldn't say that, right? Because I'm sure they could find some crazy way, but there's really, if you give me a giant slab of ribeye, I'm going to know if that's beef, you know, like, and so with these highly processed foods, you really can't even verify what you are eating. Like they could and granted, I like to think that the ingredient labels are accurate, but who's to say? Who's to even say? And so
and it's accurate within margin. I mean, even you go to the FDA's website, you pull it up, they will tell you food labels are accurate within a 15 to 25% margin.
Right.
And calorie labels in a restaurant, though they're required, are accurate within a 15 to 35% range. That means, if you go to Chipotle and you see the bowl and the bowl is 700 calories, but it could be 35% more calories than that.
We all know that Chipotle is the perfect example that serving size is unpredictable when you're not making your own food, right?
Absolutely,
And that's a more of a conversation on the calories in and calories outside. But all of this and it's why Whole Foods are so powerful and so important, is because for the most part, there's really not a whole lot of ways you can manipulate that and change that and make it it's like, you get into the science of the genetically engineered food. Is like, they could add science that makes an apple more addicting and things like that, but if it's still like serving the same nutritional purpose, is like, sure, like I'd love an apple to taste better, or
you're still not going to eat 7 apples like you could eat 7 Hershey bars,
I guess we should be careful what we wish for, though. Imagine a world where everyone starts eating whole foods and then it's just like all these scientists start, trying to change the foods to make them. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you don't give them a reason to like remove the nutrition by continuously eating these hyper-palatable foods as like a reinforcement mechanism for their decisions, if you don't do that, they're not going to remove the stuff. It's like, if all we want are the purest forms of orange, and let's say as a whole, everyone's like, I only want oranges, give me the purest orange. These companies, they're going to rush to make the purest orange. Like, nope, don't touch it. Don't remove this. Don't make it pink. Don't try to change it in any form. They want pure oranges, right? And so you kind of vote with your wallet in a sense.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think putting it like this, like our bodies are like a high performance car, right? That requires premium fuel. And yes, you could put unleaded fuel in that car and it will go for a little bit.
Right.
But you want to put premium fuel in your premium car because you want it to continue and last and functionally run optimal as long as possible. And that's what we're getting at. Put the things in your body that are going to have it running functionally and optimally as long as possible.
Yeah, the craziest thing is how long we can go eating garbage.
Humans are massively adaptable.
It blows my mind. Like, I feel like just you really don't really start seeing the health impact till you've been eating really bad foods for like decades. Right? Your body is really adaptive and it's really forgiving too. Like once you start eating these whole foods again, it heals up pretty quick. You know, your gut starts to heal, your hormones start to come back. Everything starts to feel better pretty quickly, considering how much. That said, the longer you go, the more damage you have to repair.
Right.
You know, you really see this with, you know, the obesity. Like you're not going to lose hundreds of pounds quickly. You know, it takes at least as much time as it did to get up there, right? And in some people's case, like they've been gaining, you know, 5 pounds a year for 20 years. You're severely overweight, right? And taking that back down to average is going to take several years as well. And so the earlier you can start, the better, almost always.
Functionally, humans are made to heal ourselves. Massive parts of our body, our organs, are specific to healing damage that we cause to it. And damage to our bodies in a good way, like working out, functionally makes us stronger human beings. So yes, you do have a lot of grace period. You do have a lot of time where your body, you give it the right thing, your body immediately goes, oh, I know what to do with this.
Yeah.
But what happens when you're 35, 40, 45, 50, and then you're deciding, okay, well, now I want to be healthy. Well, you've just spent half of 100 years in one state. It's a long road back the other way.
Like I've mentioned before, we're momentum based.
Yeah.
So the longer you go in a state of decay, as opposed to, you know, building back stronger and, you know, actually becoming vibrant and powerful, so to speak, the longer you're in decay, the harder it's going to be to stop.
Yeah.
Right. And switch it up and go. And I've talked about this before, like switching from a negative feedback loop to a positive feedback loop. When, like you were saying, you've been doing it for decades, you know, 30, 40 years, it's a lot more difficult. And the reality of things is like in my experience, a lot of people don't start thinking about health and fitness and nutrition until there's a catalyst. And what I mean by that is until there's some medical concern or until, you know, their uncle has a heart attack and dies, or until something happens in their life that opens their eyes and like, oh man, I got to get my stuff together. Until something like that happens. And a lot of the time it's not too late because you can always improve it. But a lot of times there's a lot of damage done. And so it takes a lot of effort to not just shift from a negative to a positive feedback loop, but also it takes a long time to heal that damage. My best example, and I've talked about this before, is when I had those few years where I drank so much milk, right? I haven't drank milk in over 10 years now. I still have skin issues. I never had acne, never had skin issues before I started doing that. And so that single decision drastically changed my skin health for the rest of my life, pretty much. You can do damage to your body and it can heal, but it's not instant, right? In some cases, in my case, it's taking 5, 6, 7 times as long to repair those few years of drinking a gallon of milk a day. And so when we're talking about these people who have over 20 years gained 200 pounds over average, that's going to take some time and that's going to take some effort. And anyone who tries to tell you that it's not, that it's going to be quick, that they can get you fast results, they aren't being honest.
No, they're not. And they're setting you up for failure. And we're not saying any of this to be negative or to make it feel like this is an insurmountable hill. We're saying this as a way to truly say that we understand. It's freaking hard. And you're not crazy for thinking it's really hard. And you're not crazy for not seeing results in 6 weeks when the girl on YouTube said you were going to have abs in 6 weeks. You're not crazy what you need to understand is there's a lot of information coming at you that is not the truth. And we want to give you the best truth that we can and set you up for success. And we understand that this is really, really hard. And we want to be by your side, and we want to help you, and we want to give you community and support and someone to talk to when it does feel insurmountable. Because inevitably, regardless of something feeling insurmountable, the minute you start walking up it, it's less and less insurmountable. The more people you have walking up with you, the more and more doable it feels. And that's what we want for you in the long run.
Right.
So, like last podcast, we're going to go ahead and do some rapid fire questions. These are some questions that I've typed up that I've heard before, that I've seen brought up, or that I've had friends or family ask me that I feel are relevant. A lot of people asking these questions. Can you name some good examples of whole foods that I could add to my grocery list that would aid me?
For the most part, people understand what's healthy. It's just making the conscious decision. But to elaborate on what is a whole food, again, it's single ingredients, and it's usually minimally processed, right? And so we're talking fruits. Most people know what fruits are, but berries, apples, oranges, pears, whatever fruits you enjoy. I eat a lot of fruits, between 9 and 10 a day. So I think that it's a flavorful way to get in your micronutrients. And then you have vegetables, a less flavorful way of getting. I'm a huge vegetable fan, but it's still like there's a lot of really good vegetables for you. So you're talking spinach, kale, carrots, all sorts of people. I feel like most people understand what a vegetable is, right?
The more colorful, the better.
And there's no secret here. And what we're trying to get away from is like hyper focusing on like single things as what's the best vegetable, what's the best fruit. When in general, most people need to be eating just more fruits and just more vegetables, instead of like trying to focus on, well, if I gotta eat vegetables, what's the perfect vegetable? It doesn't exist. We want to
eat the one that you're gonna eat.
Yeah, whatever tastes manageable. So carrots for the most part. But and then so you got fruits, you got vegetables, you got meats. Usually people tend towards leaner meats, but even fatty meats they're whole foods, they're nutritious. The fat carries a lot of extra, micronutrients. I'm a big ribeye fan. I like fatty beef. Yeah. So think pork, turkey, chicken, beef, meats, right?
Fish.
Meats, fish. Fish is the big one if you like fish. And then the questionable ones have always been grains, right? Because for a while, carbohydrates have gotten kind of a sour,
they
taste
went from being way too much to being drop all of them to who knows what.
Carbs have a purpose, right?
Absolutely.
And so eating grains, whichever grains you can really, palates, and which grains you feel like sit well with you. Like I don't eat gluten, and I like quinoa, and I like rices, and they're all processed to some extent, but again, they're minimally processed, but they're still whole food, and they're your primary source of carbohydrates, because very few, if any, athletes can perform at their peak without some form of carbohydrates outside of fruits and vegetables. It's very difficult to eat that many vegetables to get in there. So the grains kind of tie it all together, and then you've got processed foods and fats that I feel like we probably haven't touched on as much, but we'll talk about healthy fats next video. But another critical macronutrient is fat. And so fats as a whole food can look, often it kind of melds with the other. You've got animal fats that meld with the meats. Meats have animal fats. You have vegetables that have, fatty oils in them. You think olive oil or avocado oil.
Chia seeds.
And then you have the processed forms of those oils, which we'll talk about more. more next week when we talk about healthy foods. But there are, healthier oils versus non-healthy. But all of those kind of pull together as like the foods you want to stick to. And if you want a even more abstract perspective of, okay, just point to where I need to go in the grocery store to buy this, generally all the whole foods are together and generally they're unpackaged, right? There are some that it's like carrots come pre-shredded, right? Or, vegetables come, mixed leafy greens in a package. But usually for the most part, whole foods are going to be like if they are packaged, they're packaged in a way it's very obvious what they are. Like the beef comes with, just saran wrap. You can tell this is a piece of beef. You can poke it, it's beef. Apples come without anything except their wax shell. Oranges are just oranges. These are how you can recognize whole foods. And that's why, again, going back to what I was saying, like the power of whole foods is the fact that they are, in fact, a whole food, which is almost always undeniable.
Right. And, stick to the old adage, us 90s kids, which shop the perimeter of the grocery store. You want to find whole foods, you shop the perimeter of the grocery. You're doing 80-20, 80% of the perimeter of the grocery store. Most all grocery stores are laid out that way. Here's another good one, since we were kind of dipping into it, I feel. Are there whole foods that I should be careful about how much of them I am eating?
Yes. Not every whole food is low calorie.
Yeah.
Right? A big thing, and it's something I should have said earlier, nuts.
Yeah.
You can overeat nuts.
Oh, absolutely.
They're very calorically dense. You'd be surprised how few nuts takes to get a few hundred calories. And so things like that, especially when you're talking about fattier foods, because fat just by nature has more calories per gram.
Yeah,
that's just
absolutely.
how it works. And we'll talk about that next week. But the idea is like the fattier the food, the more likely you are to overeat. But it's still, again, these aren't hyper-palatable. Your nuts will fill you up. But when we're talking, what about nut butter? What about almond butter? It's not technically bad for you. In fact, it's probably good for you. But I can overeat some almond butter, right? You start putting on, 6 tablespoons on your almond butter and jelly sandwich, and now you got yourself a 1,000-calorie sandwich, and it's delicious, right?
Right.
And so I wouldn't say it's avoidable, but you need to recognize that not every whole food has the same like caloric density.
Right. Just because it's a whole food doesn't mean it's not calorie dense. Right. And like with the protein powder, just because it's a processed food doesn't mean it's all the way bad. If you really need to gain weight and you can't eat a pile of food this big, 1,000-calorie sandwich would probably do you pretty good. Yeah. But if you're trying to lose weight and you're trying to be at 1,000-calorie deficit, even in 3 days, but you're eating one of those a day, you're not going to go anywhere and you're not going to understand why. Being conscious of these things is very important.
Yeah, and again, framing it through the lens of what is a whole food, right? Mm-hmm. And then there is some nuance to it, as you can tell, but in general, if you're eating whole foods, your body's going to regulate it. Like if you're chowing down on like walnuts, eventually your body's like, I don't want any more walnuts, and you'll put the walnuts down. Like very few people are overeating.
They're not potato chips.
Very few people are overeating on those types of food. They're usually overeating on some sort of processed form of them.
Well, that kind of puts us at the end of this principle as itself. We all have to eat. We just do to function. It's your responsibility to take control of that, to have power in that, to understand that you can put things in your body that help you run at this fantastic, optimal, feeling good level. But that comes with being conscious, with reading labels, of understanding that swapping that bowl of cereal for a bowl of oatmeal with berries, or, not having a bag of chips and taking 2 apples to work. Those small changes not only are going to make a massive difference to you internally, but are going to make a massive difference to how you begin to view and see the world around you. We want you to feel confident and when you walk into a room that you understand, I see a plate and I know exactly the things that I should be eating because I understand this 80-20 idea that I'm putting whole foods in my body and why I'm choosing to do that. Why is massively important for your brain to continue to want to be sustained and want to continue down the path that you're choosing to be disciplined in doing. So as we go forward, remember, whole foods, just whole